Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today.
You know, Billy, we garden a lot. You and I both do. We're out in the
gardeners,
woods.
yes.
Gardeners. We're out in the woods for our profession and just for fun, you know. And so I got to thinking about, all these little bugs that bug us, these little vampires,
Suckers, right?
Suckers, yeah, the mosquitoes, the chiggers, the ticks, even ants. I mean, especially in our garden, I get ants on me all the time, and I'm like, and sometimes they bite you and stuff like that. So I was like, does anything good come? And you know who I had to ask.
No, we are so blessed to have our good friends over in entomology here at UK. We've got Dr. Jonathan Larson's going to be with us, as well as Blake Newtown, both entomology folks over there. And so glad to have them. They've been on, or at least Dr. Larson's been on before, but we are glad to have a first timer in Blake, and you'll get to meet Blake here in just a few minutes. But yeah, Renee, I think what you were talking about, a lot of our audience has dealt with with either ants or chiggers or ticks or mosquitoes or some things, and they're having the same thoughts. What are these things good for? So, Blake's going to be talking about maybe some of the things that those things do and how they kind of play in the natural world and their importance in that. And then we're going to have Dr. Larson talk a little bit about ticks and alpha gal, which is something that, I personally have dealt with, and we hope that we can help you all to not have to deal with it because it's not a fun experience. But we're really excited to have both these guests on. It's an entomology takeover day here on From the Woods today, and we're glad to have both of them on. If you have questions for either of our presenters as they're going, please use the chat function if you're on Zoom with us. And if you are a YouTube viewer or a podcast listener, thank you very much. But you can interact with our guests via email. You can hit us up at forestry.extension@uky.edu, and we can get any questions to our guests that way. But again, glad to have you all with us today. Renee, glad to be with you. A beautiful day here in Lexington, Kentucky. And I'm really excited about our entomology takeover day.
So. I know, right? So let's go ahead and get started. Dr. Larson, welcome back. We appreciate you being on.
I appreciate the opportunity to come back. I'm going to do the creepy part today, the uncomfortable part, the part that nobody wants to hear about. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Blake Newtown, and he's going to talk about sort of the environmental role. When we talk about these critters, I do think we come at it from a very anthropocentric view, right? Humans tend to think of them as, are they with us or are they against us? And some of those ones that you outlined, Renee, before, I think they almost always seem to fall into they're against us camp. And we're not going to save their reputation today.
I know mosquitoes are good for other things to eat them, which that's okay, but I don't like it eating me.
Right. I think that's the most interesting part of all this, that people sometimes forget we're part of the food web in many different ways. Yes. I think usually we think about that as, somebody got ate by a shark, somebody got ate by a bear, but our blood and other parts of us can be resources for things as well. And that's just kind of part of being alive. But sometimes when this happens, it's more, I'd say, traumatic or problematic than others. And I was going to talk mostly about ticks here today and talk about what they do that drives us so crazy. See if I can get this.
He might be locked up, actually.
Is he moving? He doesn't look like he's moving for me.
His eyes are blinking.
Yeah, he's alive.
Is that better?
There we go. We got it going. Yes.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you, sir. Gotcha.
I was worried about that for a moment. So when we talk about ticks, which I think I've done before here a little bit, and I know that Dr. Hannah Tiffin has also come on here and talked before about ticks. When we talk about them, I think that, there's a bunch of different ticks in Kentucky that we could refer to. There's a bunch of different species that we can encounter. Some of them are becoming more and more important, like the longhorn tick, which is an invasive species. There are brown dog ticks. There's all kinds of ticks that people can encounter. But we usually focus on three that we consider the primary tick species that impact human and animal health in the Commonwealth. And you can see a chart here sort of showing the size of these organisms in reference to a dime and a ruler, an inch ruler. And these are the black-legged tick, which are also known as deer ticks, also sometimes called the black-legged deer tick. Then there's the Lone Star tick, also sometimes called turkey ticks here in Kentucky. Some people refer to them as turkey mites. And also the immature versions are sometimes referred to as seed ticks because they're so small. And then the last one that we've got here is the American dog tick, that is also sometimes referred to as the wood tick here in Kentucky. But these are the ones that over the last couple of decades, several decades, we have been analyzing. That there's been lots of data collected on, and they're the ones that are most commonly associated with issues for humans or for animals. When we see them biting us and feeding on us, they can transfer pathogens in some cases. Other times it's just a situation where you're being fed on, you're having your blood drawn out, and then that's just not pleasant. Nobody likes to have that happen, but there's not a disease transferred. It's not always going to happen, but there are possibilities with each of these species for that to occur, and each of them are different from the others in terms of their shape and size, and then also the possible pathogens that are in them. We'll start just with an overview of the American dog tick. These are ticks that have shorter mouth parts compared to the other species we'll discuss. They are more teardrop shaped from their head to their rear end, and they have an ornate, what we call scutum. A scutum is a shield that goes over the top of the tick, and on some of the species, it can look a little different. With this species, the male scutum goes from head to tail. That's what we see on the right in this kind of grayer image with just the tick without the human skin in the background. That scutum goes all the way down the back, and it looks a bit like a Rorschach ink blot pattern. There's this kind of cream color on each side, and it will mirror each other like there's a line down the middle. Ticks are bilaterally symmetrical, much like all the other arthropods. And so that pattern is the same on both sides. The female has a shorter scutum. That's her that you see, in the image on the left. The scutum is a little more, or a little reduced, and it looks more, I think, like a lace collar. It's kind of draped around the upper part of her abdomen rather than going all the way down the body. And that means that she has more space to fill up with blood. She has to take extra blood during one of her last blood meals so that she will have enough to help generate the eggs. But you can see that they're a beefier tick. Their legs are a little bit thicker, their bodies are a little bit bigger, but their mouth parts, while they're large, they're shorter in comparison to some of the other species. These are found essentially anywhere that you wouldn't want your dog to go, probably. They're found in areas with little to no tree cover. They like grassy fields. They like to be along roads and walkways and trails in that kind of overgrown, messy area that is somewhere that dogs and other animals may kind of squirrel themselves down into. There's going to be ticks waiting at the ends of branches, at the ends of blades of grass, and that's where they're questing. The American dog tick is a really good quester. You can see in this image what that means is they kind of post up like they're a center down in the paint at a basketball game. They plant their back legs and then they project their front legs forward. And those front legs are kind of sticking out in front of them, waiting for an animal to wander by so they can clamber onto it and give it a creepy little hug and then kind of shimmy up the leg where they're going to look for a space to bite that potential host and begin to draw blood. So in conversations that I have with people about ticks, sometimes people have this conception that ticks, they're scoping us out from the tops of trees and that they're jumping onto people from up there. That is not the way that these behave. They would have a very low success rate. Ticks are not very athletic. They aren't fast. They don't have the ability to fly, thank goodness, and they're not good at jumping. They're really just very patient organisms. They sit and wait for the most part for something to come by so they can climb onto it. They don't jump, they don't hustle to get onto it. It's really just a passive thing where we brush up against them and they're able to take advantage of that situation. This is just some data from a former student in the department. Her name's Anna Pasternak. She was a tick researcher here for us, and she did tick drags. If you ever meet tick researchers or ever you look into tick research, you will find that one of the more common methods for surveilling these is to take a piece of burlap, and then that burlap will be tied kind of to a dowel rod, which will have string trailing off of each end of it that you tie into a triangle. And then you can drag this through the underbrush and the ticks will climb onto it thinking that it's an animal passing by, and then you can easily pick the ticks off the burlap and preserve them in alcohol. During her survey work that she did in Kentucky for a few years, she was looking for this species as well as the two others that we're going to talk about. And what we wanted to see was here in the 2020s, what is the tick diversity in Kentucky? What are the more common ticks? But then also what times of the year are they more common and at which life stage? So this is her data that shows what we saw with the American dog tick. So the American dog tick is a kind of an April, May, June, and July species. There's also some August data. One of the interesting things I think about this is if you look, this is very heavily skewed towards the adults. She collected very few of the immature forms of this tick. So ticks develop from an egg as a larva, as a nymph, and then as an adult. They do not have a pupal stage or anything like that. They have this gradual metamorphosis that they go through. And usually we can find these other life stages as well. But with this species, it was quite low. She was not encountering them, but she was catching plenty of the adults. And this highlights, I think, the kind of prime time tick season that we see here in the Commonwealth. This used to be the most common tick in the state. You can see she caught up to almost 450 of them in one collection in May. This is not the most common tick anymore. It's been supplanted, but this is the one that I think if you talk to maybe an older member of your community, this would be the one that they were more familiar with in their childhood. It is most associated in our state with the pathogen that causes Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Rocky Mountain spotted fever is actually kind of a terrible name for this disease because it's not very common in the Rocky Mountains. It's actually more common on this side of the country, from my understanding of the CDC data, and it's not isolated over there as the name might imply. It's mostly spread in this state by American dog tick. It's caused by a bacteria called Rickettsia rickettsii, and you can see what happens to folks who are infected with this. So they end up developing this red spotted rash on the palms and then on the soles of the feet. That's what you see in the image on the right. They also end up more often with a high fever and body aches. Not everybody gets the rash, but most people do. There is some data to suggest that this doesn't happen instantaneously when you're bitten by this tick. So the tick would have to feed on you for a 4 to 10 hour time frame in order to move its gut contents enough to release the pathogen inside of you. So as ticks feed, what they do is they insert their mouth. The mouth has a tongue with backward facing spines that helps to anchor the tick in place. And as they feed, I don't know how to describe it other than they're like swishing back and forth from your body into their gut, and they're swapping some of the stuff that's inside of them into you and what's in you inside of them. And as they do this, they work their way through their gut, and eventually they may pass a pathogen on to you. So when you see these kinds of feeding time windows, that's the result of, is the tick isn't just instantly pumping you completely full of everything in their body. Not all of them have the pathogens, so it's not a guarantee that you'd end up with it anyway. But there usually is a window of time to get the tick off of you before a pathogen is moved from the tick into you. This is some data from the Department of Public Health in Frankfurt that shows the counties where we've had higher incidences of Rocky Mountain spotted fever in Kentucky. It's not the most current data, it's only up to 2022, but I think it's very evocative of the situation. You can see that there is a central pocket in between kind of Owensboro and Louisville that I would say is the hot spot for Rocky Mountain spotted fever, those counties that you see highlighted in the darker, more maroon color. And then again, it starts to ramp up the further west you go as we start to get past Owensboro and getting closer to Paducah, some of those counties out there. And then there is another hot spot sort of down on the Tennessee border, Pulaski and some of those other counties down, or not Pulaski, the counties next door to Pulaski, that are a higher incident rate. So this is up to 439 people in some of these darker counties that per 100,000 that have been confirmed infected, and doctors reported this data on up to the right folks. So it's not a complete census of everybody that's had it. Not everybody is going to be reported because a doctor may not send that data in or they may not go to the doctor. But this is kind of, I think, a good window into what we experience here in Kentucky. One of the other ticks that I think is probably more famous and also inspires a lot of dread is the black-legged tick or the deer tick. These ticks are a little different looking. The female, which are the ones that when I receive samples, I almost always with this species get an adult female. I rarely receive submissions of males or the larva and nymphal forms. The female has kind of this orangey color, reddish orange color to her abdomen. They get their name because they do have really dark colored legs as well. The male looks a little different. He's dark black or dark brown, black all over, but then kind of has this creamy khaki horseshoe around the edge of his body. The immature forms, they have kind of see-through-ish parts on them towards the rear, but overall, they have longer mouth parts when you compare them to the dog tick, and they're very different in color. These are anywhere that their preferred host, white-tailed deer, are found. For me, it seems when I travel the state of Kentucky, the white-tailed deer like to live in the middle of the Bluegrass Parkway, based on the number of deer carcasses I see as I travel county to county. But anywhere that they would be more naturally is going to be where this particular tick likes to live. So they want to be at the about leg height, shoulder height for this particular host. So that's also going to be at a height where we could pick them up. If you're a hiker, if you're a hunter, if you're a fisher, somebody that's going through understory brush in the woods, you are going to encounter these ticks pretty frequently. One of the other interesting things about this species are that they have a bit of a reverse life cycle compared to the others. They are active at different times of the year. These adults are active any day above freezing. So we see them more in October through February, the adult forms. So if you're somebody that's going out and hunting during that time, if it's above freezing, you could still be exposed to these ticks, which unfortunately means we're never really free of ticks here in the state of Kentucky. This is the data that Anna collected a few years ago, showing when they're active, highlighting what I was just saying, that November and December were the hot spots for her to collect the adults. And then they have their nymphs and larvae are more active in the summer. This offset kind of life cycle helps to separate them from some of the other species. It also means that if somebody's bitten by a tick in a winter month, we often can theorize that it's going to end up being this species that they're going to submit with us. They are the vector for Lyme disease. I should say they're the vector for the pathogen that causes Lyme disease, Borrelia burgdorferi, in this state. If you went to the West Coast, it would be different. But here in Kentucky, this is the only species that has been confirmed to carry this pathogen and then spread it to another human. So it's the only vector we have here. Lyme disease is on the rise in the New England states. I think that they've had a real uptick in cases up beyond Pennsylvania into the mid-Atlantic area. And we're seeing more cases in Kentucky. This is different than what people maybe heard about 30 or 20 years ago, where the Kentucky area was not considered kind of a primary Lyme disease area. That is changing. We are dealing with this tick more, and also we're dealing with this pathogen more. Lyme disease, it has a series of symptoms that it can create. I think the most famous one is the bullseye rash. That's what most people associate with it. I want to emphasize not everybody gets this rash when they're bitten by this tick and have the pathogen spread into them, but many people do. There's going to be more common symptoms, which are a high fever and fatigue and stiffness. So you're bitten by this tick and you start to feel like you have the flu. It would be highly advisable for you to go to the doctor and seek medical attention to see if they can't flush your body out and hopefully treat you for Lyme and resolve that situation. So again, this is not the entire picture. This is the data that we have up to 2022, data that was submitted voluntarily by doctors. You can see that there's kind of an Appalachian flavor to this one, where the eastern part of the state, it has higher incidences, with other counties kind of in the central part of the state showing higher incidences. This is not as high as Rocky Mountain spotted fever. It only goes up to 178 out of 100,000. But that's still a lot of people that are being afflicted with this. I'm not trying to minimize it. Relatively speaking, we do not have as many cases as New England does, but that is something that could change in the near future, and more people could end up dealing with this here in Kentucky. So we're trying to get people aware of this. We're especially trying to get doctors to be aware of this. There are some physicians that we've encountered that are resistant to the fact that Lyme disease is much more present here than it was in the past. And that can be a hard hurdle to overcome if you're somebody that's seeking guidance and help from a doctor to try and resolve your Lyme situation. So this is something that's on the rise and people need to be aware of. But the kind of star of the show today, and for the most part with ticks in Kentucky, are the Lone Star ticks. Lone Star ticks are different looking than the other ones in that they're rounder. If you look at these and kind of think back to the last two, I think that you can see with the larva and nymph especially, these are more hockey puck shaped. As they reach adulthood, they become a little more oblong, a little more egg-shaped, but they still have a rounder body overall compared to the other species, I think. They also have longer mouth parts relative to their body size than the other two species. They usually are this kind of dark orange color that you see here, kind of an amber color. The adult male does not really have a distinctive pattern. There are these kind of yellow lines on his back, and the edge of his abdomen looks like it's crimped a little bit, almost like the edge of ravioli. I don't mean to ruin ravioli for people, but that's kind of what it reminds me of. Then the female on the left there, she's the one that gives the group their name. They have that white dot on their back. That's why they are called the Lone Star tick, not because they're from Texas. So these are active April to August as adults in Kentucky. So we're still in prime Lone Star tick season. Before that, before April and after August, that's when we start to see more cases with the seed ticks, those smaller ones, the larva or the nymph, that may get on people in high numbers. Lone Star ticks are found in woodland areas with a lot of undergrowth. They are questers, but they can also be active. Sometimes they will clamor after things that they want to climb on. I had a client bring me these small ticks that you see here on the left, and said that these were following him on a trail. They were kind of like the Walking Dead. They were shambling after him. So they are able to sense a potential host and try to get onto that host in a slightly more active fashion than what we see with most other species. But they will also just quest in the undergrowth if they need to, if that's the best way to find a potential host. The data here again shows when they're active, but I would point you to the one of the axes there with the numbers. The number of ticks collected here, we're into the thousands. The other two, we were in the low hundreds. This one, we're trying to get over 3,000, approaching 3,500 ticks collected. So the adults are active, like I said before, kind of that April to August timeframe, some of them even in March. It's the nymphs that pop up in the summer, and then the larvae that show up in the fall. So we have these kind of overlapping generations, I guess you could say, that are occurring. And we see these larvae pop up at this distinct point in August. And that's when people start getting the seed ticks on them. And that can trail into the winter as well. The Lone Star tick is most famous, I would say, for its association with alpha-gal syndrome. Alpha-gal syndrome in the past has also been referred to as red meat allergy. That's a name that we're trying to move away from in our communities because it's not evocative of everything that alpha-gal is present in. And so we're trying to be more conscientious of that and point out that alpha-gal can be found in cosmetics and medication and other things. It's not just found in red meat, but it is a term that you might see online used to describe this allergic condition. This is induced by the bite of a tick. This is in Kentucky, in North America, the primary kind of vector, I guess you could say, is the Lone Star tick. Vector is not quite the right term here because it's not a pathogen, it's a sugar molecule that's being picked up. But in this case, the tick that's moving the sugar molecule around is the Lone Star tick here in North America. There was an isolated case confirmed in Maine, and I think maybe Minnesota was the other one that involved deer ticks. But so far, that has not been found in Kentucky or other states, and those were just one or two ticks, from what I understand, in those areas. In other nations around the world, alpha-gal syndrome has also appeared. Alpha-gal syndrome is associated with distinctly other tick species in Japan, Australia, Brazil, Europe, all these other places that we are dealing with it. So that's what we deal with here is this species. Its name is derived from the alpha-gal sugar molecule that's involved with the allergy. This is alpha-gal that you're seeing here. It's not from Ohio. Those are oxygens and hydrogens that are attached all over this particular molecule, but it's a sugar molecule that is found in the bloodstream of all other mammals except for humans and primates, some other primates. So we eat this all the time. We are exposed to this very frequently, and we usually have no problem with it. The other animals that have it, they just have different blood than we do, and so they have the molecule, but for some reason we do not. This is going to be a problem though, because Lone Star ticks can sometimes have alpha-gal in their saliva. In the past, it's been considered that this was a situation where the tick would bite something with alpha-gal in their bloodstream, and then the alpha-gal would get stuck in their mouth at different feeding times, and then they could pass it to your bloodstream when they bit you. There is also some data to suggest that the ticks may be generating alpha-gal on their own. The easiest way to kind of put a pin in this is to say it's still a heavily researched area. It's not entirely clear how this is occurring, what has transpired to create the situation where Lone Star ticks have alpha-gal in their saliva. Something has changed and they're picking it up or developing it themselves, but then regardless, they're passing it into people. It's not every tick bite from a Lone Star tick, but it does happen seemingly at higher and higher rates. And when they do this, they inject the sugar molecule into your bloodstream. Your body will mount an immune reaction to that invader, And then the next time you're exposed to this again, it will mount that same immune response. Usually this is through eating red meat. So somebody is sort of exposed to alpha-gal through a tick bite. The next time they sit down to a meal, and the meal includes beef or pork or any of these other red meats, then the immune response will occur, typically starting in the gut. There are other ways that you could be exposed to alpha-gal post-exposure in your blood. This can be through medication. Some medications use gelatin and things like that, and the gelatin can contain alpha-gal. People can be exposed when they're birthing cattle. We've read about this where people have alpha-gal. They're helping to get the calves out, and they're being exposed to alpha-gal at that time, and they have a reaction. Cosmetics can have it. Certain other products, soaps and other things can contain alpha-gal. And so however you're exposed, your body mounts this immune response again. And usually the symptoms include the following. So you have hives. A lot of cases involve nausea. Some of them will include diarrhea. There can be more extreme symptoms, including rapid breathing, a decrease in blood pressure, swelling of the lips and eyes and throat, stomach pain, and dizziness. If you get more than one of these at the same time, you may be going into anaphylaxis. This can be as simple as somebody gets an upset stomach after they eat a hamburger, all the way to a more extreme reaction where somebody has to take extreme measures. They have to go to the hospital, they have to take an injection, they have to take Benadryl, something like that, in order to decrease the symptoms. Currently, there is no known treatment for red meat allergy. Cases have resolved over time in a lot of studies. You can consult an allergist to try and better understand your numbers, quote unquote numbers, what kind of profile you have in your bloodstream. The number is the kind of representative of what you may be dealing with and how extreme your situation may be. Most people are afflicted for 1 to 3 years. The condition can last longer. If you're re-exposed to alpha-gal, if you get another tick bite and it's injected into you again, it can reassert the condition and kind of make it worse, or just make your situation relapse all the way back to kind of square one. There is no known cure, though. There's no way to stop you from having this reaction. Some people are able to figure a way out with their life of making sure that they protect themselves when they go out to eat. This can go all the way from just ordering specifically fish and turkey and chicken, all the way to having to ask people to cook on different surfaces to keep the alpha-gal molecule away from your food. It can go into checking the labels for lots of things. There is legislation to try and include alpha-gal more prominently as an allergen that is listed on certain products so more people are aware. What we see in terms of people's lifestyle is that they implement a lot of dietary changes. Poultry and seafood become a large part of the diet. Eggs, beans, and nuts are also eaten for protein. Some patients say they can't eat dairy, so cheese and ice cream kind of go off the menu. Soap products may have to be reorganized so that you get different ones that don't have alpha-gal. Gelatin, there's certain medications that you'll have to open the capsule and take the medicine because you won't be able to take the capsule anymore. So it can be very life altering. It can be something that makes life a lot harder for people. There are ways to still have a normal and happy life. When you have alpha-gal, we have a publication called Living with Alpha-gal that I can send to be included in any show notes and things like that, that just kind of goes over some of that. Our friends in nutrition here on campus are working to put out more information about that, just so that people can feel like they still have something they can eat. They still have something that they can do for their life in terms of protecting themselves. I would say we are one of the battleground states for this syndrome. This is something that more and more people are hearing about in Kentucky. Our beef cattle industry is confronted with this. We are one of the beef cattle king states, right? The biggest herd east of the Mississippi River is what I am informed. So this is not only a problem for people at a personal level, it can also be a problem for an economic driver in the state. If fewer and fewer people can consume cattle or cattle-based products, that's not good for cattle farmers who already face kind of an uphill battle. There are other states along the Mississippi River corridor that are also experiencing high levels of alpha-gal incidences. This is CDC data up to 2022. This is, again, the most up-to-date map that I have available to me. You can see Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Missouri, I would say, are some of the most afflicted states with alpha-gal. If you go east, Virginia and North Carolina also see high incidences, and that's where the story began. It's a very long and sordid tale that involves some cancer medications, which is where this was first discovered. But over there on that side of the country, they also see it and they associate it with Lone Star tick. And the area that you see in the center, where Kentucky and Tennessee, et cetera, are reflected, I would say that this has to do with populations of Lone Star tick. These are also the states where that tick is going to be the most common. Other states go out west to Nebraska, the Dakotas, Montana. There are incidences, but Lone Star tick is not nearly as common in those states as it is here. So that's probably what is driving this situation here. We're one of the fastest growing states in terms of alpha-gal population. And so it's something that we need to teach people about and raise that awareness of. Billy already shared his personal story. I don't want to put him on the spot or anything, but this is the situation as we understand it right now. And I'm happy to try and take any questions before we switch over to Blake.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate your presentation. And, we've had a lot of comments going on, and this is getting bigger and bigger, sounds like. And I know, Billy, you have firsthand experience about this alpha gal, but I did not realize all the I thought it was just a red meat thing. You're saying all these different ones, and I was like, oh no, it's a whole lot more.
Yeah, personally, it was not a good experience. I ended up having, excuse me, hives for basically a year or so and couldn't figure it out. Kept going back to the doctor. The doctor wasn't sure. They asked about changes in, laundry detergent or anything like that, new lotions or whatever, and I had no changes in that. So, for a while, probably 3 doctor's appointments, they really didn't know what was going on. And then I had a really bad reaction after an exposure one time, and that led more to like an anaphylactic type event. And then I went to the doctor, and then they ran the blood test on me and found my numbers were like through the roof. So it was a little concerning. It took me a little over 3 years to come off of that. Really guarded myself against any further exposure, and apparently I was successful in doing so. So over time, my numbers, as you were talking about, Jonathan, came down to the point to where I could reintroduce, mammals basically into my diet. And so far, so good. But the problem is that we're exposed to ticks all the time, especially. And she said our profession of foresters was the #1 profession that had alpha gal, which makes sense, right? They're out and exposed to it. But any of our landowners or county agents or anybody that's out in the woods really need to be aware of this situation. If you're having some weird reactions and typically several hours after you've kind of taken that meat in, that's another kind of clue. Be attentive to that, right? And get up with your doctor because you don't want a bad situation.
Billy, that's good that you pointed that out. I didn't hit that hard enough just to say that this isn't instantaneous. Usually what we see reported from people is they got bit by the tick, and then maybe the next day or something, they sit down, they have a hamburger for lunch, they go to bed that night, and all of a sudden it hits them. They start to have this reaction. It doesn't happen the moment the meat hits your mouth. It's something that usually occurs a little further down the line from that meal, after lunch, after dinner, whenever it is that you've eaten it. I see in the comments lots of there. I have been fascinated by this emu and ostrich thing. I don't giggle because I think it's funny. I giggle because I was in it. I went to Union County a while back. I think it was Union County, and I did an alpha gal seminar for people, and I had no idea that this was a thing. But they were telling there's an ostrich farm that I think is in the southeast, and like this is like their main business plan now is they are selling to people with alpha gal, and they're trying to ramp up production. Apparently, ostrich has a similar taste profile to beef, and it kind of has the same texture when you cook it. I would never have guessed that in a million years, but it seems like something that might be on the market for people in the near future. I know that a lot of people in the alpha gal community, they talk about fins and scales, like you're reduced to eating anything with fins and scales. You're not eating things with fur on it anymore. So this is beef, pork, venison, all of the lamb, all those things that I think are really common in the American diet. Beef is a part of a lot of meals. It all kind of goes to the wayside. It's not something that you're really going to be able to eat anymore.
Yeah,
It changes your grocery bill.
It really does, and it's a good point you brought up. Sometimes there's those products that are hidden, right? You may think you're consuming something that doesn't contain mammal products, and I have, through basically casings is another thing, right? You buy chicken sausage,
Yep.
and they put the casing in beef or pork, and so you got to be really attentive to that, really. And folks, take this thing serious, right? If you're having some weird symptoms that you can't really explain, and you're out in the woods, or at least in fields and edges, I would be attentive that this might be something going on with you, and let your doctors know that.
Yeah. And so there are several confirmed cases of alpha gal, I would imagine, in Kentucky. So, especially because I know a lot of the foresters we deal with, they're like, yeah, I've got it, and so it just seems like there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Trying to look through the comments to make sure we haven't missed any questions.
No, yeah, it's been a hot topic, and I know you all have done a lot of work there out of entomology trying to help spread the word about this, Dr. Larson. So thanks for that, for sure.
So yeah, Dr. Larson, if you can put that link to that publication
I
in
think you did. Yep.
I just put our ant fact about living with alpha gal. I hope it's helpful to some of those folks. I did see one. Can I answer the hornet question?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. You can wait till the first freeze and they'll die out naturally. If it's in the ground and you know where the entrance is to the nest, you can spray into it with an aerosol product at dusk or night, and it will aerosolize and kill the colony. You want to wait till then so that you get maximum control and minimize your chances of being stung. If you need a light source to do that, you can put red cellophane over a flashlight, and it makes it harder for the insects to detect, supposedly. So that will help you to illuminate the area. But that aerosol product, if you want to get more adventurous, a dust product can also be applied into the entrance, but that means you got to get a little more up close and personal. No matter what you choose, have an escape route in mind and a safe space that you can get to just in case they do come out after you. But usually the aerosol products, Raid is the one that I think is easiest to find. They work rapidly. It's like 1 to 2 second knockdown. So they shouldn't be able to come out and get you. But I do like to warn people, find somewhere safe to go to.
Yeah, definitely. Folks, too, if you're not on our email lists, so you get show topics like this, go ahead and put it in the chat pod what your email is, or you can email me at forestry.extension@uky.edu, and we can go ahead and let you know when these topics are going to be on. So that would be one good thing for y'all to do, so that you know when these shows will be on. But Dr. Larson, we greatly appreciate you being on. I think
Yep.
all of the questions answered.
Yep.
I believe if we didn't, folks, please let us know. And because I was trying to read through them all really quickly. But
and I'll stick around till the end.
Yeah.
And I'll be happy to
that'd be
chat.
great. If we didn't, you can ask at the end and we'll definitely get those answers.
I do see some conversation about gas. Don't use gasoline. Gasoline's not a good pest control product.
Because it can burn you too.
Yeah. If you pour gas into a nest like that and light it, it can explode. I've received videos of ant nests being exploded and stuff. So
so you can explode all the ants on you,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Stinging pests and gasoline are not a good mixture.
Yes. Please be safe, folks. No whammies. That's what we want. No whammies.
Definitely.
All right. Yeah. Awesome, Dr. Larson. As always, really appreciate the work you do for us here.
I'm excited about Blake's debut.
Right.
I hope I've left him enough time.
Blake is going to tell us, what are these things good for, right?
Anything good. So Blake, turn your camera on.
Come on, Blake, come join us.
So, he's talked about ticks and all that. Is there anything good that comes from these creatures? I mean,
come on, Blake, you're our only hope, man. Come on.
Yeah, we get that question a lot. Is like every animal supposedly has some role out there. What are these things good for? And I don't have a whole lot of positive things to say about them. One thing, just before we leave the topic, we talked a whole lot about what ticks can do to you. But it's really important to know sort of what you can do, and to protect yourself from that alpha gal. Read up on tick prevention. I take it very seriously. If I know I'm going out and stepping off the pavement anywhere, I wear some tick repellent these days because I do not want to get alpha gal. So we've got a lot of good fact sheets on tick prevention. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen, and we'll try to see if we can discover anything positive about chiggers and ticks and some of these other things. So hopefully the
Good.
screen is sharing there. Does that look all right?
Red chiggers, yes, sir.
Yeah, so
Good.
chiggers are something that we'll talk about ticks a little bit too, but chiggers are related to ticks. And there's a lot of sort of mystery and misunderstanding about what chiggers are and what they do. I would encourage anybody to read more about their life cycle. I actually have to reread it every once in a while because I forget some of the things about them. But chiggers are mites. And technically a tick is kind of a mite too. So they one of the things that distinguishes them is that they have 8 legs. So ticks and chiggers both have 8 legs. But the stage of the chigger that bites you is called the larval stage, and it only has 6 legs, which is kind of interesting. And the larval stage of the chigger is not technically invisible or microscopic, but it pretty much is. It's extremely small. So what happens is people get these little mosquito bite looking things on them that are sometimes a lot itchier than mosquito bites, and they didn't see anything bite them. It's like, what is this thing? And many times if you have been outside and a few hours later you get some strange bites, especially around your ankles, around your waist, you didn't see a mosquito crawling under your pants, it may have been a chigger. So that's what chiggers are. They tend to be in sort of hot, kind of wet areas, like around swampy areas where there's grass and sunshine hitting. So if you've spent some time in those kinds of areas, that's when you tend to get chiggers. The one good thing to know about chiggers is that the same things you can use to repel ticks and mosquitoes also work on chiggers. So if you are going out and protecting yourselves against ticks, it will repel, or in some cases, depending on which product you're using, kill the chiggers before they have a chance to bite you. So that's what the chigger is. And what it does is, so this is the mysterious part too. A lot of people believe that chiggers actually burrow into your skin, and they do not do that. That's a very important thing to realize, because some of the myths about how to treat chiggers is to do things like I've heard put clear nail polish over the chigger bite, or put a match to it, stuff like that. There is no need to do that. They are not actually burrowing into your skin. They're kind of attaching themselves to you a little bit the same way that a tick does. It's just that they're much smaller. So they're just burrowing onto you, and they don't actually suck blood like a tick does. Instead, I'm not quite sure how this works, but their saliva kind of goes into your skin, creates almost a solid tube that's sort of made out of their saliva, and they break down your skin and sort of suck that up. So they're not really drinking blood. And a good thing to know about them is, as far as we know, and I'm sort of finding some wood in here to knock on. I don't think I have any. Here's some fake wood paneling over here. As far as we know, they don't transmit any diseases to us. Maybe that information will change in the future, but as far as we know, chiggers do not give you any diseases. But it's important to note that they don't burrow into you, because they're just basically sitting on the surface of your skin, and they can be easily dislodged. They're not really attached very strongly. So the best way to get rid of them, if you didn't already use insect prevention stuff beforehand, like DEET or something like that, the best way is to wash them off of you. So what I used to do, I had a house in a different part of Lexington than I live now, and I knew that if I went outside in the summer and stepped off the pavement anywhere around my house, I would get 5, 10, 20 or more chigger bites, guaranteed. And so what I would do is, if I did any yard work and if I didn't wear any repellents, I would make sure to take a bath or a shower about an hour after I was outside, sort of scrub down your ankles and your legs and stuff like that. And it works. It would reduce the bites down to 0 or 1 or 2 instead of 20 or 30. Because you can wipe them off either sort of before they've attached, or even after they've attached, before they've had a chance to sort of make this welt that gets bigger and bigger. And another thing that's interesting about them is that they are not natural parasites of humans. So ticks do pretty well on us, but chiggers are not really supposed to be a parasite on people. So they get on us accidentally, thinking that they're one of their natural hosts, which in most cases are reptiles. They try to bite us. They're doing their best to try to get on there and eat our skin. but they actually don't survive on us. They die or drop away eventually. So even if they do stay on you before you wipe them off, they're only going to be there for a few hours or a day or two, and they're never going to get big and puffed up like a tick does or anything like that. And like I said, they never burrow into your skin. So they really aren't trying to get us onto us on purpose. They're getting onto us instead of something like a reptile. So, this is a picture, by the way, of the larval stage of chiggers on a snake. So that is one of their hosts out there. So they can't really survive on humans, but they are out there normally trying to get on reptiles and small mammals. So on the topic of what is it that chiggers actually do out there besides bite us, is that mainly the other thing that they do is bite other things. They're biting reptiles, turtles, snakes, stuff like that, and they just get on us accidentally. And as far as what sort of good do they do out there, not much, as far as I know. They like any creature, they are a part of the food web, and when they are very small, they are probably being eaten by very small spiders, other very small predatory creatures out there in sort of the grass layer. And then the one interesting thing about them is when they become an adult, they're actually pretty visible when they're an adult. They're not huge. They're a couple of millimeters, and they're bright velvety red. And the adult is a predator, so they could be considered a beneficial creature at that point. They're probably not making a huge difference in as far as reducing pests numbers out there, but at least the adults are not biting us, and they're out there eating other things instead. One thing I wanted to mention, I don't have a picture of it in here, but many times people will see these very small red mites running around on concrete in the summer, and you can see like dozens of them at a time. Those are not chiggers. They are a kind of mite, so they're related to chiggers, but that is not what's biting you. Chiggers are much smaller than that, and they generally don't get on concrete. Those are the kinds that we see running around a concrete, I believe, are just called concrete mites, and they don't bite anybody, so you don't have to worry about those. Don't have to control those. Don't do anything about those. So that's a little bit about chiggers, and now we'll move on to some other creatures here. So Dr. Larson spent a lot of time talking about ticks. I only have one slide on ticks here. There is not much nice to say about ticks. Many times, for some reason, my son loves to ask me the question: if you could destroy one animal on the face of the earth, eliminate one species, what would you pick? And many times I will, I don't know if it's a good idea to eliminate any species from the planet, but tick, especially Lone Star tick, might be the one that I would pick. There are more of them than there used to be, and they just seem to be a problem. That one thing to know about ticks is that, as far as I know, every species of tick, and there are a lot of them, there are more than just the ones that bite people. There are other ones out there biting birds and stuff like that. As far as I know, all of them are obligate parasites. That means they don't do any predation. They don't do any kind of plant feeding. They don't do anything except get on vertebrates and suck their blood. So there's not a whole lot nice to say about them. And then they're spreading disease out there as well. So nothing too much positive to say about them, except once again, they are a part of the food chain. Little spiders, birds, mammals will eat these. I'm not sure if very many creatures actually specialize in feeding on ticks. I wouldn't be too surprised if there are a handful of mammals out there that just by grooming ticks off their body, that might be like a 25% of their diet. But otherwise, they're really not doing much out there that's beneficial. One thing that we hear about them sometimes is that they are a major food source for possums. There's some memes and sayings out there that possums eat. I can't even remember the number, 100 ticks a day or 1,000 ticks a week or something like that. That's probably not true, unless once again they're grooming it off of themselves. I'm sure possums will eat a tick if they find one. I would imagine that hunting for ticks would be kind of difficult to do as your primary food source. And plus, possums have garbage to get into, so they don't need to eat a lot of ticks. There's plenty of garbage out there for them to eat. So I'm sure that possums do eat some of them. But as far as ticks being a major food source for possums, I doubt that's true. Now we'll move on to just a couple of other creatures and some of these things actually are sort of more beneficial than other ones. But ants. So ants are something that, there's several species that we don't like. Carpenter ants, the little, I call them vinegar ants, the little ants that get inside our houses seemingly every spring. They get into our food, they cause other problems. And of course, Kentucky now has fire ants. And so that's an actual medical problem. So there are several species of ants that we don't like, but it's really only a handful of ant species that cause people problems. Maybe, I don't know, a couple dozen or so, at least in our area, that would be considered pests of humans. But really, most ants are beneficial in some way. There's lots of species of ants. There's in the world, there's hundreds of them, and in Kentucky, there's several dozens more than the ones that we think of as pests. But they actually do lots of positive things. One of the main things that they do, even some of the pest species, is that they're important for decomposition. So you've got, wood out there rotting in the forests, old leaves, stuff like that. That stuff needs to get turned back into soil, and ants are a big part of that. Of course, termites are a part of that cycle as well, but ants are a huge part of that. And also soil aeration. So our soil, it's out there, it's getting baked by the sun. It's sort of hard for water and air to get through that unless you have things like worms and ants digging tunnels and moving it around and aerating it. So that's actually one of the more beneficial things that they do that we sometimes forget about. But they do other stuff too. Ants actually a lot of them are predators. So some of our ants will eat wood and stuff like that, or will eat our tortilla chips that they get into our house to feed on. But a lot of them will eat bugs. So ants can actually be very important pest control in agriculture and garden situations. So ants are out there killing other bugs for us, which is good. And pollination, which is sometimes we forget about this, but ants visit flowers because they love sweets. So they go up there to get that nectar. And even though they aren't as good at pollinating as something like a bee because they aren't furry, they do move pollen around from flower to flower. And so ants can be important for pollination. So we do like ants. Sometimes we don't like ticks, but we do like ants. Oh, and this is one that I thought the From the Woods crowd might appreciate. Some ants are seed dispersers. So this is bloodroot, which is one of my favorite wildflowers. I really like it. It's very sort of fleshy and very tropical looking. I think it's really cool. But its seed depends on being moved from the flower to other places to get moved around, and ants do this. There's a little bit of a coating on the surface of the surface of the seed that ants eat. I think it's starchy, which sort of tracks for something that an ant would like. But they don't eat the rest of the seed, so they take it. They might take it to their nest or drop it somewhere along the way, and this helps for bloodroot to disperse. And they do this for other kinds of flowers in other parts of the world as well. And now mosquitoes. So mosquitoes is another one that when my son asks me which thing I would like to destroy, mosquitoes is high on my list, especially the one pictured here. This is the African I'm sorry, the Asian tiger mosquito with the very vivid white banding on its legs. There are other mosquitoes that have some white on its legs too, but this is the one that we see so commonly in Kentucky in our own backyards. And one reason that I don't feel too bad about wanting to eliminate this, especially from our area, is that it's an invasive species. It's not supposed to be here anyway. So there's really nothing nice to say about the Asian tiger mosquito, especially in Kentucky. But there's other kinds of mosquitoes too. And as we know, many of them feed on our blood and on the blood of other animals. They can spread diseases, lots of different diseases, especially in tropical areas. In Kentucky, we don't worry as much about mosquito diseases, but we do have them from time to time, especially in the summer months. If you look around on the news right now, you'll see that West Nile cases have started to appear in Kentucky. And so it's good to protect yourself from mosquitoes. So what we encourage people to do every year is usually around midsummer, start checking the news, check the public health websites and see if West Nile cases have started to appear. And that means it's a good idea to start protecting yourself against mosquito bites at that time. Otherwise, we don't worry too much about mosquito diseases in Kentucky. But what do these things do anything good besides drink our blood and spread diseases a lot of times from birds to humans, which is kind of freaky? And the answer is yes, they actually do some interesting things. Probably not as valuable to us as ants are, but some mosquitoes, in fact, all male mosquitoes. So it's only the females that drink blood. They need that protein for their eggs. But all male mosquitoes, even of the species that we don't like, visit nectar and sometimes other kinds of plant juices for their meals instead of blood. So male mosquitoes never bite us. And there are other types of mosquitoes, in fact, a lot of them actually, that drink nectar and stuff even as females, and they don't drink our blood at all. So there are several mosquito species that don't drink blood ever. The one pictured here is what is sometimes called the elephant mosquito. This one lives here in Kentucky. It's huge. It's almost as big as something like a crane fly. It's a really big mosquito. That's one of the reasons I think it's called an elephant mosquito. It's also got its little proboscis there. Looks a little bit elephant-like, but it's very large, and it's a nectar feeder. It's also interesting because as a baby, it kills other mosquitoes. So this is definitely one of our favorite kind of mosquitoes. We'll talk a little bit more about that one in a second. But because these mosquitoes, male mosquitoes and other mosquitoes, are visiting flowers to get nectar, once again, they can be pollinators. Any kind of animal that visits a flower and then goes to another flower can be a pollinator. So mosquitoes are no exception, and mosquitoes actually do some pollination out there for us. And then probably the most important thing that mosquitoes do for us is that they are a part of the ecosystem, and maybe a little more prominent part of the ecosystem than something like a chigger or a tick, because there's just so many of these mosquitoes, and they are breeding in areas where some creatures that we like dragonflies and damselflies, will eat a lot of mosquitoes. So things like dragonflies and damselflies, which are very beautiful creatures. There are people who, I know some of our people in forestry are very into bird watching. So there are actually dragonfly watchers out there who have books and binoculars dedicated to watching dragonflies and life lists and all that kind of stuff. Those dragonflies and damselflies really depend on mosquitoes and a few other things for them to eat. But also bats and birds will eat some mosquitoes as well. Here is a picture of the elephant mosquito larva. So this is one of my favorite things. So the larva in there that looks more like a light tan or white. I'm not sure which mosquito species that is, but that's one of the ones that we don't like. And the one with kind of the darker color and the bigger head, that's the elephant mosquito larva, and it loves to eat other mosquitoes. So we love the elephant mosquito larva. And this is actually, I just read recently, there are some attempts in other countries to use the elephant mosquito as a biocontrol agent to kill mosquitoes. So that would be really cool if that were to happen. And just a couple of pictures. I'm pretty much done here, but here is a dragonfly eating a mosquito. You can see the little white and black bands on its legs there. So that might be an Asian tiger mosquito. And then the really cool part, though, is that dragonflies don't just live in the air, right? Baby dragonflies live underwater with the baby mosquitoes. So every baby mosquito starts out as a larva that lives in water. Same thing with dragonflies. Their nymphs live underwater, and they are mosquito killing engines. And so here's a picture, if you can kind of see what's going on. I think this will repeat itself, but over there on the left is a mosquito larva. Dragonfly babies have an extendable, sort of telescopic mouth part that shoots forward and catches mosquito larvae. They'll also catch some other things like sometimes tadpoles and minnows, but they love mosquito larvae because there's so many of them. And it looks a little bit like the alien from the Alien movie because it has this extendable jaw. So you can thank a mosquito for keeping our dragonflies and damselflies alive. But other than that, I honestly don't have too much nice to say about any of these creatures. So I will turn it back over to you guys. I will stop sharing my screen here.
That was an awesome presentation too. I really do appreciate that. And I was kind of hoping for a little bit of some justification for these things, but yeah, I was pretty much right.
Oh yeah.
A little bit. A little bit, they get to eat other things, so that worked out. But it's very interesting about the dragonflies. I did not know that, so that's one thing I love about From the Woods today. There's always something new that we learn. We did have a question too. Is there any suggestions on how to keep carpenter ants, I guess, out of the house? She says in the house. They have used traps and they don't want to spray. So any way of I've got carpenter ants on my fence too. They use it as a super highway. I've sprayed, but it doesn't seem to work. So it's like, how do you get rid of them things?
Yeah, whenever I've dealt with ants, I use baits. I haven't tried that with carpenter ants. Dr. Larson, if you have, the baits work really well for the vinegar ant things, but
Carpenter
what
ant
have you?
baiting is a little different. since most of our baits are kind of sugar based, the carpenter ants don't always go to them. You have to get something that explicitly lists carpenter ants as kind of like its primary target. So carpenter ant bait gel is usually what it'll be called, some sort of trade name with that. You have to use that in order to get to the queen. If you spray areas where the workers are out foraging, you're just kind of treating symptoms. You're never going to get rid of the whole colony. You can also hire somebody to find the nest and then drill into it and treat it directly with a powder, but that does become a little more intensive, and outdoors would be very hard.
Okay.
Yeah, I followed mine and I still couldn't. It's like they just disappear.
They knew you were tailing them.
Yeah, yeah. Like loser.
Exactly.
Oh, gentlemen, thank you both so
Awesome
much.
job.
It was so good. And Blake, a first timer, glad to have you on. We'll have you back for sure. You really did a great job. And Dr. Larson, as always, we really appreciate what you share with our audience. So good stuff. Good stuff as always. And yeah,
Appreciate
appreciate
you both being on.
Yep, good stuff.
Yeah,
And
thanks
folks,
for inviting us.
Yep. We thank all the great questions and the engagement from the audience. We really appreciate having you all as part of this great episode. So good deal.
Definitely. So if you think you've missed anything, in a couple of days, we'll have this on fromthewoodstoday.com, and you'll be able to rewatch it as much as you want. Like, Billy and I say, you can binge watch us if you want. We have over 250 shows of content on there. I think it's like almost 300 at this point, but it's up there. Again, so you just go to fromthewoodstoday.com. And if you find anything that's in your woods that you are just like, I don't know what this is, there's a little survey there that you can click and you can find out. You can send us an information or take a picture and send it to us, and we'll be happy to try to pass that along. May have to pass it along to Jonathan or Blake. Was like, what is this bug? And they can identify it for you.
Yeah, good deal. Yeah, because if you're dealing with it, others probably are too. So let's help each other out. So, all right, gentlemen, good job. Thank you all both for being with us. And yeah, I look forward to seeing everybody next week on From the Woods Today.
Take care. Bye.
From the woods today. From the woods today.